Should I put this at the start of the podcast?
Yeah. After navigating a winding rural lane with vast green bushes either side, and navigating a rather awkward encounter...
Are you Lisa?
No, she'll be in the house.
She's in there.
I'm the gardener.
Oh.
My producer and I arrive at today's destination, the beautiful red brick home of Lisa.
Okay.
Ring the bell.
Are you Lisa?
Hello.
Hi,
Nice to see you. Hi.
Yeah.
Shoes off,
Yeah, of course.
and
of course.
in we go.
It's good to be house proud.
It's a bit busy here today. We've got the gardeners in there.
Speaking of gardening, let's not beat around the bush. Lisa has done very well for herself. The first thing I see when I walk in is a human-sized sculpture of a melting fab lolly. Lisa isn't embarrassed talking about money. In fact, quite the opposite.
I just think it's fascinating that we can go into a pub on a Monday night with a load of girlfriends and you will talk about the sexual positions you were in the night before, but you wouldn't dare ask them how much they earn. That's ridiculous. How has it come to this?
But she wasn't always like this.
When I was 11, I got bullied really badly because I was poor and because everybody else in the school was very, very rich. I thought money was bad. I thought money was a bad thing. The reason I thought money was bad is because the people that were bullying me were bad and they were rich.
Today on Money Confidential, we're exploring what happens when you make it from a council estate to cashing in paychecks that put you not in the top 1% of the population, but the 0.1%. Welcome to Money Confidential with me, Katie Morley. As the Telegraph's financial agony aunt, I'm heading up and down the country to hear directly from you and the awkward everyday money problems affecting your life and relationships. Each episode, I'm also joined by a financial expert in their field to help solve these dilemmas, as well as a Telegraph columnist offering their thoughts. Today, sudden wealth syndrome. What's it like suddenly coming into serious money when you've previously been on the breadline? Well, most of us will never know, but could there be a secret millionaire in your friendship circle? And if there was, would you want to know? When I posted on social media asking for high earners to come forward to talk, I was met with a wall of silence. But privately, in our inbox, it was a different story. Jack, not his real name and not his real voice, did reach out to us and wanted to talk. From humble beginnings, he's very recently started earning over £1 million a year and fears being ostracised if his family and friends find out. We won't go into how he's made the money to protect his identity. Here's our conversation. Jack, what was your money situation growing up as a child?
I grew up in a single-parent family. It was just my mum. My dad wasn't on the scene at all, never was. So we didn't really have much money. But I lived in a part of the world where no one had much money. So I wasn't really aware of the fact that we had not much money until I left that environment and went to university. My mum did really well. She created an environment where I never felt like I didn't have anything. But looking back, there was clearly not much.
What did you go on to do as an adult? Talk me through your kind of income and wealth situation up until recently.
Yeah, so when I graduated university, I was just quite naive financially. So I got myself into quite a lot of mess with debt. Bad relationships, bad financial decisions led to me being in quite a big hole. It took me years to get myself out of that, really.
How did that arise?
I got into a bad relationship where the other person didn't really contribute. So when the relationship ended, there was a lot of unpaid bills that were in both names, rent and council tax and things like that. I had to take the burden. I had 30 grand's worth of debt and nowhere to live, and I ended up in a rat-infested house share. So it wasn't amazing.
So you've gone from a rat-infested flat share to earning, as you described it to me earlier, as much as your doctor friends are earning in 2 years in 1 month. How quickly has that happened for you? Has it been quite sudden?
This year, basically, I've done 100 grand in a month.
Wow, that is some serious income. And, how has it sort of made you feel?
It's surprising, really. You tell yourself, if I had this much money, then I would be happy. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, woe is me, my wallet is so heavy, you know.
Look, there's no such thing as a tiny violin on this show. We don't do that.
But, yeah, the hunt is amazing. but there also becomes this kind of like pressure around it. I know what it's like to have no money, and I know that I have this opportunity to change my life. And I'm scared that I'm not going to maximize that opportunity and grab it. And that kind of sours the whole thing. Like, here's a load of money. Holy crap. I need to make sure that I don't let this slip through my hands.
If you manage to share this news with your family and friends?
There's certain friends that I can talk to about it, but the kind of friends that are like, go you're a legend. There's a lot of friends that I have that would just look at me as if I was an alien if I told them what I was earning. And there's also a lot of friends that are the smartest people I've ever met, who've worked in noble professions, who earn nothing in comparison. Armed forces, doctors, and how do I say to them, you save lives or risk your own, and I earn more than you do? So, you know, I have to be a bit careful because I don't want to come across like I'm bragging.
So you sort of feel that you have to conceal this success almost, but you must be thinking, what am I going to do with this money? You know, am I going to buy a house? Is it going to be visible? Will other people notice this even if I don't tell them? Is that something you worry about?
Like, one thing I've learned about money is that most people think about money in the wrong way.
What do you mean by that?
So when I'm around my friends and family, I hear them talking about money. And so they'll talk about, we're going to sell this house and move to a slightly bigger house and have just as big of a mortgage, or we're going to upgrade the car. We can have the Tesla and not this, or with the Chrome. And I'm just sat there going, none of this matters. I don't care about stuff. I don't care about cars and houses per se. So I have to be careful not to blurt out when I'm sat at family dinner that I'm like, having a car and finances is not a way to get rich. It's just a way to make it look like you are, you know?
Yes, but I'm intrigued though, Jack, because you say you've always seen yourself as somebody who will be wealthy one day, but you don't want the material possession. So what is it that attracts you about accumulating wealth?
I just want to be able to decide how I spend my time, and I don't ever want to be in a position like I was in my 20s where I was trapped. And I want to be able to take my family away from those sort of struggles. And yeah, if you give me the choice and say, my children, can I protect them from that kind of trauma? Then of course I will. Yeah, they'll probably be spoiled little brats, but they won't have to live in a rat-infested flat. So that's kind of what drives me.
So most of your family don't know. You're obviously sharing this very freely here with me now, which I'm very grateful for you for doing. How are you feeling in this moment, being able to share it so freely?
Yeah, it's nice because it's quite a lonely place. And I know that sounds so stupid, but where do you go to talk to someone about the idea of earning over £1 million in a year when you're from a council estate? You can go and talk to other entrepreneurs, but they're not my kind of people. They're all just talking about synergy and all these weird things, and I just want to talk to my mates about it, but they live in a different world. So this is nice to just kind of get it off your chest.
Thanks to Jack there for talking to us. I could tell he found it refreshing to have the space to share his big news without being judged. He's felt like he's had nowhere to go with these feelings. So I brought in someone who's really qualified in this very specific area of psychology to help. Dr Stephen Goldbart, who's personally coined the phrase sudden wealth syndrome. I asked him whether Jack could be suffering from exactly this.
Indeed, sudden wealth syndrome is a way of describing the variety of psychological issues and symptoms that are a consequence of new or sudden wealth. And as in Jack's story, when that event happens, it has an impact on one's identity that is unexpected and counterintuitive. Since most of us have the idea that, whoa, if we had all the money we could ever want, our lives would be great. But indeed, money is not an endpoint, and people like Jack experience it as a stressor. It's a positive stressor, but it affects how they see themselves as a person. Who am I now?
But it's counterintuitive because you sort of assume, oh my goodness, if I earned £1 million a year, think of all the things I could do. I'd be so happy. It can be hard for people to relate to this in a way, can't it?
Absolutely. There's a cultural and societal and religious background story here, which is what are the messages about the meaning of money, the value of it, that affect how we perceive having it or not having it. Certainly in England, the working class and the wealthy have very different perceptions of what it means to have money and very different feelings about it. Having money is amazing, but the impact on psychology and how we feel about ourselves, how our friends feel about us, how our families feel about us is dramatic. So what we say to our families we work with is it's all about how you manage it, or think of that financial abundance as rocket fuel. Where will it take you?
So how can he kind of take these, bearing in mind that he's all very new to this level of earnings, how can he go forward in a more positive way, taking his relationships and those close to him with him along on the journey, even though he fears that they may see him in a different way or resent him in some way if he does come clean?
So there's a journey to managing the impact of wealth and eventually enabling that resource to be a positive influence in your life. And that journey takes the individual through 4 progressive stages. It's something we call wealth identity, from that first honeymoon phase all the way to a phase where I got it, it's a part of me, it doesn't overdefine me, and I have a sense of life direction. The very first step for anyone coming into money is to stop the action, not make any big decisions, get some clarity on their values, and begin a learning journey. And that learning journey is what they need to know about themselves, who the people are in their life, what they can and can't say to various individuals, and to learn the mechanisms by which people who have succeeded in managing the impact of wealth have used.
So that's interesting that you say that, because in the interview, Jack does say, he seems quite clear about what's important to him at the moment. He's not somebody that wants to go out straight away and buy a big house or a fancy car. In fact, he sort of really doesn't want those things. And to him, the money seems to equate to safety and to being able to have control over his time.
Right. So you're beginning to derive some of the core values that he has. In the process we use with clients, we help them, let's not worry about how you're going to deal with this money, what decisions. Let's just focus on who you are, what really matters to you, what you'd like to see happen, and what you want to make sure it doesn't happen.
Maybe some of his fears are actually founded in reality. Is it the case that it may be that if his friends found out, then they maybe would be jealous or resent him?
I think it's quite natural for most people to have envy or jealousy of someone they know closely who all of a sudden has a lot of money. And I think that part of the learning here is understanding what is the common emotional reactions of people in your society to all of a sudden coming into wealth. And part of the loneliness he feels, which is a very common symptom of sudden wealth syndrome, has to do with he doesn't have anyone to talk with who understands this. And look, as we said earlier, you have to dig pretty deep in your emotional pockets to find empathy for somebody who has a lot of money when you're struggling paycheck to paycheck to make your life work.
Absolutely. And I said to him, there's no such thing as a tiny violin on this show. We at Money Confidential want to create a safe space for everyone to be able to discuss their very valid feelings on money. But that might not be the case out there in the real world, right?
Absolutely. As we've experienced, people who come into money, there are some lifelong friends who remain lifelong friends, and there are some people who basically end up becoming parasitic or like vultures. And it's just part of that real life experience. And that's why it's so important to learn very specific skills in order to begin to manage this experience. In fact, we have a new book out right now called the 10 by 10 Learning Journey, in which we articulate exactly what those competencies are and what people can learn.
Great. And so what would be the first couple of things then that Jack could do towards this journey of bringing his friends in and bringing them along for this ride that he's on that's very exciting for him, but he's worried about sharing with them?
Well, I think before he talks to a friend, he first needs to be talking to himself and with somebody who's safe. And as he began to talk to you, he was beginning to have a counseling session with you that you could see as the conversation went on was relieving for him. He needs to talk this thing out, get clear and take hold of his own values and his own life direction, and then begin to pick and choose 1 or 2 people who he really, really trusts. And as Lisa talked about, begin to share some of this and see how it goes. Take it one step at a time. Money is a lightning rod issue for people. And as you mentioned, I believe it's more taboo of a topic than sex is. So it takes a little time to get into it. And the safety part's very important.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, most people won't be able to relate to the level of earnings that Jack is describing, but people might be able to relate to this in their own way. For example, if you've had a pay rise and you're suddenly earning, for you, a lot more money than you had been, and maybe that you're also earning more than your colleagues, that sort of sense of guilt, it can be there, can't it?
Yes, and the guilt, and particularly when it comes quickly, there's kind of a curve here between lottery winners or inheritors, people who've worked a year or two and people who've worked 30 years. And generally the people who have spent more of their lives creating the wealth are much more comfortable, have a more powerful sense of self-agency. So if you come into it relatively quickly and easily, and it's not a fair world. As Jack was saying, there's people who get paid a lot less, nurses, for example, than people who happen to win it big in the stock market or do a startup, and a few years later, boom, they're making £1 million a year. I mean, it's not fair, and so it's easy to feel a sense of what psychologists call the imposter syndrome. Oh, I must be a fraud. It's not really me. I just got lucky. All that is psychologically challenging.
And that is such a challenge, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you've kind of got yourself and your self-esteem, and on the other hand, you've got the unfairness of the wider system around you, which frankly you have no control over. All you can do is navigate your own way through the system, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. And our sense of self-esteem, our confidence, is built not just inside ourselves, it's built with our friends, with our family, with our cultural world. When all of a sudden, boom, you no longer are the same, particularly in their eyes. Like having to work 60 hours a week and then all of a sudden not having to work at all. I mean, that's a huge life change. You're no longer really part of, the working class.
Yeah, and it's that working class kind of guilt that I wanted to talk to you about as well. Is it kind of a symptom of social mobility in that, if you do make your way from the bottom to the top like that, through your own hard work, is it the price that they're paying for that?
I think the sentiment and the experience of it is very different. If I've built a business for 30 years and now I'm 65 years old and my hard work has created this great wealth, I've had a chance to get used to the idea of it. That's different than, say, I'm thinking of a client of ours who won the lottery and came into all this money and his life was destroyed. Why? Because his friends didn't see him in the same way. He no longer had a workplace to go to that was meaningful for him. He felt lonely, he felt afraid, and every time he dated a woman, his name was in the media. He couldn't escape them saying, oh, what's it like to have all that money? And why don't you do this or why don't you do that? So again, I think it's very hard for the average listener to take this in, but it's a powerful fuel in our societies.
What did you recommend to that person? What advice would you give them?
Well, again, we'd begin by doing some education and reading and just to help them normalize it and understand they're going to go through 4 stages of wealth identity development and to sit down and figure out what do they need to learn in order to feel in the driver's seat and to make choices and to learn that's aligned with what matters most to them, for themselves, for their families, and for the larger world. And everyone has a different answer to that, but it's a process that people can go through.
And do you think that concealing this wealth forever is a realistic solution?
I've been in this space for some 30 years, and I've known a couple people to try to do that. It's pretty darn hard. I mean, what's the half-life of a secret in the internet world? It's pretty short. And think about what kind of life that'll give you, where you're basically hiding out from most people. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to proceed that way.
Stephen, you mentioned you had a book out. What's it called and where can we find it?
So the book is called The 10 by 10 Learning Roadmap, Advancing Flourishing in Families of Wealth, and you can get it on Amazon.
Dr. Goldbart, thank you. In just a mo, I'm joined by Lisa Johnson, a self-made millionaire who is on the opposite end of the spectrum to Jack. She speaks openly about her debt, her wealth, and how she deals with coming into money. Back in a mo. Welcome back to Money Confidential. Real people, real problems, and real talk. With me, Katie Morley. I wanted to hear from someone who'd been there, done that, and got over the guilt. Lisa Johnson, who you heard from earlier, might be exactly the rags to riches story that Jack needs to hear. A self-made multi-millionaire brought up on a council estate with a debilitating belief that money was bad. We sat down in her opulent home with gardeners flitting about outside, primming and pruning, ready for summer, to discuss her working class guilt and how sudden wealth affected her relationships.
Because of where I grew up, we grew up in poverty, and there was no doubt about that. I got a scholarship to a private school when I was 11 years old, and until that point I don't think I realised we were what you would call poor, because when you're a kid you don't really even think about yourself in that way. You just think your friends live in different houses. But then when I was 11 I got bullied really badly because I was poor and because everybody else in the school was very, very rich. And that's when I kind of knew. And then because of that poverty and because of the things that happened to me growing up, all because of a lack of money, how it shaped me at first was when I became successful. I was in debt until I was 40 years old. So I didn't make any money until I was 40. And how it shaped me was I couldn't make any money, like when I started my business. And I had to do a lot of work. And I realised that it was because I thought money was bad. I thought money was a bad thing. The reason I thought money was bad is because the people that were bullying me were bad and they were rich. It was as simple as that. But also, things like when you're on a council estate and somebody comes past in a Porsche, my family and friends did not say, wow, look at the person in a Porsche. I wish we could be like that. They were very derogatory about, oh, look at them, how the other half live. I wonder what she's had to do to get that. It was definitely that money was a bad thing. Having money made you almost evil. We even show that on television and everything, like the villain is always rich. And so I believed all of that. It went into my subconscious and that's what I thought was true. And then it just compounded it when I went to a school where the kids were rich and they bullied me for being not rich.
I was curious to get the whole picture and asked Lisa to dig more into her problems with debt.
I got into debt, first of all, really early, in my 20s. I was living on credit cards, I was living on loans, it was literally to be able to live that I had that debt at the beginning. I went bankrupt at about the age of 26, and a judge literally said to me, "You are bad with money." That basically wiped my debt from that point. Then everything was fine. I started making my own money. I did quite well. I ended up in investment banking, making around £60,000 a year, which is pretty good from where I had come from. But then in my 30s, I got pregnant with twins. I realised very quickly there is no way that I was going to be able to live the life that I had had before. I was going to Canary Wharf at 6 o'clock in the morning and I was coming home at 10 p.m. and never seeing the kids. So the only option available to me was to go and work nearer my house. Now the only jobs available to me there were office junior jobs, PA jobs again. So I started again. It was like I'd gone back 15 years and this time the problem was that kind of money doesn't even cover the childcare. And so I was living on credit cards again.
Lisa walks me through her first business venture, going from earning £1.15 an hour to returning to the same money she was on before becoming pregnant. It was her second business venture, though, that really brought her the wealth she has today.
Successful in some way. In the first year, I'd made $220,000 in profit, which was more than I'd ever seen in my entire life. But in year 2, I was working 30 hours a month and I was earning over $1 million in profit. I was definitely held back in those first few years of having a business by my thoughts around money and my mindset over money, because I thought that if I made a lot of money, I'd be like those people at the school. I'd be a bully too. I'd be a mean person. I would be the horrible person in the Porsche going through the council estate, and I didn't want to be that. And so I, without even realising, to self-sabotage myself to not make it.
So how did your friends and family react when you did become that wealthy?
My family are really happy for me. They don't completely understand what I do. I think my dad thinks I play on the internet for money. But they were happy for me, but they like where they are. Like my extended family, my aunts and uncles, they still live on a council estate. They're very happy on a council estate. This isn't, my ambitions aren't their ambitions, and that's fine. And most people were happy for me, but there were some people that didn't like that I'd moved. I had a group of friends that was a bit like, who does Lisa think she is? Now she talks about money online, which is my job. Some of them told me that they didn't like what I was doing. They didn't like that I was talking about money online. I think that in this country, in the UK, we have a really bad relationship with money where we're taught from an early age that it's vulgar to talk about it, and then we're expected to go and make it like something that we see so taboo that we shouldn't even talk about. But if you were going to a personal trainer, you would want to see that they were fit.
How did you react when your situation changed? Did you feel guilty for the sudden change in circumstance?
That feeling of almost fraud, like, why am I getting this money? I'm not working any harder than some of my friends, but I'm getting all of the money. That was real, that kind of guilt. I still now, take my friends on yacht trips in Greece and things like that because I want to share the wealth. I've always wanted to be like that. I've always known that I would want to share it. There is always a little bit of guilt there that it is happening to you, that you have managed to turn things around when some other people might not have. So yeah, I felt bad some of the time, but I also wanted to bring people with me on that journey. It wasn't like I would have given anyone anything that they'd asked for. And sometimes to my detriment, I did give people money that I probably should not have done. People would suddenly come out of the woodwork who I didn't really know very well at all and say, oh, we're friends and I really need this and I really need that. Is there any way you can pay for it? I can see you've got some money, and I would. I still do that now, but I'm much more wary of who I'm giving it to, whereas before it would make me feel better about the fact that I was earning money if I could give it away, remembering that my background was that people who earn money are bad people. And so I wanted to prove to myself that isn't true. I could be a good person.
What's your advice to someone whose financial situation suddenly does change? Because it must feel strange.
Yeah, and you will feel strange if you just suddenly start earning a completely different bracket. I think my best advice is to be really good with communication. I think that if you talk to the people who are your friends and tell them how you're feeling about it, they'll support you. And I think that's something I didn't do. So, talk to your family and friends, say, I have come into this money. I've been doing this and this is what's happened. Feel a bit weird about it because of this, and this. They will then support you. It's when you kind of go off and start doing all of these fun things and people feel left behind. We're human. We feel envious. We can't help but compare. And so, allowing someone to have a bit of grace over that and speaking to them about how you don't want it to change your friendship or your relationship definitely helps. But always at the back of your mind, remembering that if somebody is a true friend and they like you for you, how much money you make or don't make is never going to be the thing. I've had friends who I thought were friends for me, and they weren't friends for me. They were friends for the audience I could give them online, or the money I had, or the status, or any of that kind of thing. And so I think really cherish the friends that you have before you come into money. My best friends are still the friends that I had when I had no money at all and I was £35,000 in debt. And I'm really appreciative of those people in my life.
So we heard from Jack earlier, who's agonising over whether to talk to people about his finances. What do you think? Is it worth hiding it from those around you?
Yeah, I don't think you should hide anything. It's definitely a mistake to hide it. It just perpetuates this myth that we should hide everything about money. And, I just think it's fascinating that we can go into a pub on a Monday night with a load of girlfriends and you will talk about the sexual positions you were in the night before, but you wouldn't dare ask them how much they earn. That's ridiculous. How has it come to this? Let's be more open about money. The reason there's inequality about money is because women never asked how much people were on in the same job as them. We need to start talking more about money, especially women, people that are from backgrounds that wouldn't normally have money. If we start talking about it more, it's going to become much easier to get. I didn't used to tell people I was in debt, but I used to think there was shame on that I'd done something wrong, when actually it was just circumstances that led me to be there. And circumstances, a lot of which weren't in my control. And that's okay. It's okay to sometimes be in debt and sometimes have money. And none of those things make you a good or a bad person. Money at all doesn't make you a good or a bad person. I am no different to the person I was 7 years ago. I'm exactly the same. I just have more money and therefore more opportunities to do things.
Thanks so much to Lisa for a cup of tea and a proper chinwag about wealth. I really admire Lisa, not just for her success, but for her openness around this topic. I'd love to catch up with Jack in a few years to see how his feelings around wealth have evolved. Will he be out and proud with a fab lolly in his hallway? Still a secret millionaire? Or something in between? Only time will tell. What do you think? Should we talk about money as openly as we discuss sex and relationships? Should people go public with their big salaries? Or is it all a bit vulgar? Email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk and we'll return to it in a future episode. So we've got Kamal Ahmed here. He's rushed down from the Daily Tea studio to be here. Thank you so much for coming. I know how busy you are. We're talking about two people who have come from working class backgrounds and they're very much self-made millionaires. But both of them are telling us that they've been quite unhappy with this. Do you find that surprising at all?
I don't actually. I think that our relationship with money is one of the most difficult things you navigate with your family, with your loved ones. It's a typically British thing. We don't talk about it, but it's hugely important. And for my generation, I'm in my 50s, you don't talk about your income or how much salary you get. Having an honest conversation, I think, is the starting point for a lot of this, because I used to be economics editor here at the Telegraph some years ago. And I remember then working often on stories about people's income and sharing information about where you are in terms of your income. I think is really a vital part of getting used to those changes that you'll have in life, because money is such a central part of your psychology, how you feel comfortable. Can you provide for your family? Can you make a home that you love, a place which is secure for you? So I think the first thing to think about is having the right kind of conversation. The only person I'm really straightforward with on money is the person I live with and I love.
And that's a private conversation, isn't it?
That's a super private conversation.
Yeah.
For my children's generation and for my partner's children's generation in their early 20s, and I love to see this, they're much more open with how much they earn per hour, what jobs they want to do, how they work. And that's very refreshing, because I think that it's not having the conversation that has probably left my generation in a position where we don't understand enough about money.
I mean, I think it's slightly different from my generation. I think the fact that everyone's houses are on Rightmove and you can see how much people paid for their house, you can almost deduce it. You don't even have to ask them now.
But then I suppose the other thing about that is there is a bit of a downside to that. Everything is now comparable. We lived quite a pretty humble life, relatively small house in West London where I grew up, but I didn't have anything to compare it with.
Whereas now you can see all this fantastic wealth on Instagram, can't you, all around you?
And you think that's
normal?
The danger is it normalizes what people think a good life looks like. And of course, in the end, a good life is not about money. It's about your loving relationships. It's about work that has purpose. It's about your close friends and your family. So there's ups and downs with the fact that, as you say, young people and your generation are able to discuss it much more openly. That's a good thing. And also, of course, with that, it means that the difference in money between men and women has been tackled because there's more transparency. And that's got to be a good thing. The notion of the pay gap, for example, which when I first went into work, I don't think was a subject for much discussion.
Interesting. And, for Jack, who, we're trying to help here, if you were to offer any advice, imagine he was your friend and he was going to come out to you as a millionaire at this point, how can he bring this up tactfully with you? What sort of things can he say to kind of bring you in?
I think it's about talking about what is the purpose of your wealth. You have been successful, so own that success. I always say to my children, own your successes. But I would then suggest that rather than sort of speaking about it directly, you show what you're doing. So you might say, hey, Kamal, I've either come into a bit of money or I'm lucky enough to be in this position and I want to help by doing Y. As you say, like the Rightmove thing, most people can have a pretty clear judgment about where people stand on the wealth ladder. You don't need to say anything about that. But what you can show is what do you do with the money. And I think that allows you permission to say, well, on the one hand, I have the accoutrements of wealth, maybe a big house, a nice car, go on nice holidays. But what I do with my wealth, which makes me feel better and also I think makes my family, friends, loved ones feel better, is what do I do with that money? And certainly plenty of people who've been incredibly successful and are wealthy, they're often very humble. And you know that they have been successful or they are independently wealthy for other reasons, but they have a sort of humility to it. Everyone understands security for your family, security for your children. I think that's really important. Everyone understands giving, having a purpose. What are you doing to support people with that success that you have had? A little bit of glitz on the side. I hope no one's too much of a killjoy in life to think, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You should enjoy yourself. But maybe my thing is, don't flaunt it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much, Kamal. Great to hear from you.
Lovely to be on the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks to all our guests for their time. Sudden wealth syndrome. It isn't something many of us will experience, but it is a real phenomenon. Some might write it off as a first world problem, but there's no such thing as a tiny violin on this show. Problems of all shapes and sizes are welcome to be discussed, and we'll always respect you and try and help. On that note, is there something you want to get off your chest? Email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk or fill in the form via the link below. It takes about 60 seconds and can be totally anonymous. Thank you for listening to Money Confidential. Please do help grow the show by rating on your podcast app and leaving a nice review. You can find me on Instagram at moneybackmorley. Today's episode was produced by Hannah Walker-Brown, sound design and mixing by Robin the Fog, and our series producer is Giles Gear. Ta-ta for now, sausage.
Is that okay?
It's
Lovely.
perfect. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Good luck with it. How's it going?
It's going well, yeah.
Do you need to turn it off or something?
I think Louise is going to come and turn it off.
fine.
But yeah, no, it's going
Is it
really
going well?
It's going well.